Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another YouTube video. Today we're going to be talking about and summarizing the FNCS finals of this weekend for EU. Now, this is one of those finals that was absolutely stacked, containing all of the big boy pros that we're used to seeing in a final situation, and it was really close up until the end. So we're going to go through every single game one by one and see what happened, who took out on top, and which 5 players qualified to the finals. Now, we're going to start off first by looking at the actual map that we have of the final. Now, we have a bunch of the pros being uncontested, and the ones that are favored to go through to the next round were all uncontested, namely Chapix and Tayson over on the mid-map side. We have Malibu and MrSavage's right to the south, very close by. Maybe there's a room for some fighting over there, but it didn't really happen too often in the finals, since Malibu and MrSavage's were actually contested by another team of Pablo Wingu and Swag. We had Queasy and Venom near Shifty side, sports with those Spider-Man gauntlets, those grapplers. They're going to be utilizing that a lot. We have Thomas AC and Trippin over at the Rave Cave, as they always are, even since last season. They've chosen to stuck by that drop spot. Other favorites like Chapix and Chicho, one of the most consistent duos we've seen in a final, or in one of the most consistent duos we've seen in the game. I really compare them to someone like Cammy and Seti, who actually didn't qualify to this final either, so we had some room here for mid-ground teams to do super well. Other than that, we had Pink and Anas also favorites coming in to qualifying today, and a bunch of other pros, but all eyes are usually going to be on Chapix and Tayson, Thomas AC Trippin, Queasy and Venom, Malibu Herstash, and of course Hen and MrSavage over at Tilted Towers. It's been a while since we've seen MrSavage be uncontested in a finals, especially in Tilted Towers being such a massive drop spot, and it's very interesting to see how they could have progressed in this finals and where they ended up placing. So let's get into it. Hopping into game number one. Game number one started with 91 people in total. The loading bug continues to plague the game, as 9 players just basically didn't get into the game. It didn't get restarted as expected, and that's basically it, which made this game a little bit more dead. Early on, we had the spawn fight of Reason Noah up against Mariah and Nebs. They 50-50 spawn over near the barnyard area, and Reason Noah lost. Nebs and Mariah actually taking the first game against them, surprisingly enough, because we really expected Reason and Noah to be the stronger spawn fighting duo. Malibu and MrSavage over in that mid-map area pinch Swag and Pablo to some third-party shots, and ended up getting the kills with the help of Tayson and Chapix, who came in third party just a little bit, and also Malibu, and then finally coming up with a clutch as a solo. Over towards the mid game in the first game, early rotates from Tayson and Chapix allowed them to get a lot of really early tags, and a late rotate from Queasy and Venom with their grapplers, which allowed them to have that playstyle to their advantage, made them be 900 above Storm Surge with 0 kills, which is absolutely insane and really shows how much they understand this season and their sort of playstyle. Going towards the late game, Queasy and Venom went on top of Height going into the first moving. Unfortunately though, Queasy gets split up. Venom on the backside of Zoe couldn't keep it, and then Chapix notices a solo on the front side of Height, goes front side, sprays it out and takes it away from them. After that, they run out of mats, and then Chris notices them on top. Then they take Hype from free, and essentially from that point onwards, they're just on Hype easily. They win the game for free. The game ends very early as well because of the horrible water zones that we saw, and game number one goes to Chris and Vortex, and that's a name we haven't really seen in a very long time. Game number two started again with action for Noah and Reason over near the north side of that drop spot. Now a quick beam initializes the fight between them, and then they instantly kill Nebs and Mariah in that spawn fight, which makes it 1-1 now for that spawn fight overall. Moving over towards the mid game, we saw a late rotate of Anas and Pink, and that gets them killed very early on. We're seeing some cracks in the way that they're playing from their new drop spot, and they're struggling with the new types of surge, and they're trying to fix that issue by W keying, but it's not really working out for them overall. Afterwards, some Malibu and MrSavage with some early aggression into the half and half, and that gets them caught out, and then the game basically gets ruined from there, and they're having a struggle in the first part of this tournament. Moving all the way towards the late game, we saw Venom and Queasy on Height in half and half again for the second time in a row. They go towards the front side of zone, but unfortunately Venom gets caught out and beamed, and therefore is forced to drop down, but they still kept it overall, luckily for them, but not without using a bunch of mats and obviously shielding that situation. From there on, on Cheatin and Gripey, they Spider-Man forwards and they run into Venno, and then they notice Tayson going up for height at the exact same time, which gives them the opportunity to go towards front side and try to take it. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out for them as Tayson and Chapix were good enough to keep it, and alpha height from Venno and Queasy and the rest of them in that lobby. A little bit later, we saw some aggression out of Tayson and Chapix, which forces them down all the way towards the low ground, where they do start to frag out just a little bit, and then Tayson and Chapix on their zero mats do get spotted, which allows Cheatin and Gripey to go up for high ground, and from there on onwards, the zone pulls up a mountain, and Cheatin and Gripey are greeted with the easy win with 9 kills in total. Going into game number 3, we see Malibuca MrSavage's again with a weaker landing, and that gets him caught out and dead within the first minute of the game. And this is sometimes typical for Malibuca and MrSavage's to start off very, very slow, or sometimes they just start off with a bang as well. But this tournament, it was slow as they only got 18 points in total in the first 3 games, which is a horrible performance with the expectations that people had of them. We saw moving over towards Hen and Savage, they were aggressed upon inside of Tilted, and then Savage gets both early game kills, and right now they had 63 points in 3 games, which is a very, very good start, putting them somewhere in the top 10. So it was very good for Hen and Savage, the new duo coming into this finals. Going towards the mid game, we saw Deceptus and DKS struggling below Sturge. So far they've been very unimpressive in this lobby, only having 21 points in total. They are a new duo with Deceptus, used to playing with Kinzo, DKS with Bad Step, and now coming together and making the final, but they struggled, and with the Storm Surge as well, they go down very early on. Moving over towards Savage and Hen yet again. Savage, they do get caught out, and Savage dies early, followed by Hen, and they die on 71 points in their 3rd game. Moving all the way towards the late game, we don't see a Queasy and Venno on the high ground this time in half and half, so maybe a little bit of an adaptation since it didn't really work in the previous games. And then we saw Mixon and Arthur, the Polish duo, on top of high ground, who've been very quiet for the first few games on 19 points. And this late game was essentially the Venno show. We saw him racking up a bunch of kills on the backside of zone. All the way to the other side, we see Tayson and Chapix looking up towards high ground and seeing that it's scuffed from Arthur and Mixon, and they take it away from them very, very quickly. Pink, this time actually seeing them in a late game for once. We see him trying to prep out height and seeing how they react. Good for Tayson and Chapix, they did have enough materials and they looked strong enough, so Pink didn't take it. So Pink and Nats decided to move all the way towards low ground, and we see them playing low ground from that moving zone, which is a bit of a contrast of what we've seen from previous seasons of them always taking high ground. Over on the other side, we saw Queasy and Venno take high ground now against Tayson and Chapix with a big fight, with again Venno being very impressive, taking out Tayson very early on in that 2v2 battle for high ground, getting him his 11th kill of the game, which is absolutely ridiculous as a solo. Queasy goes down, and with all of that commotion, Pink and Anas on low ground on the front side of zone were able to just win the game very quietly, even though they got 10 kills, which is actually a lot considering what we've seen of them of previous seasons and playstyles. Game number 4 continued on for the spawn fights that we saw of Malibuca versus Swag and Pablo, and this time Malibuca and MrSavage's take care of them very quickly with some early kills. Over towards the other spawn fight, Marine and Nebs did get pushed by Reason and Noah again this time, but they did get killed, making the overall score that we saw for them 2-1 for Noah and Reason, with one of them splitting one of the previous games. Moving over towards the mid game, we saw Hen and Savage aggressively getting a beam on Malibuca and deciding that this was the fight they wanted to take, and they jumped into a box and put themselves into all of Malibuca and MrSavage's piece control below, and that ended with them dying and giving Malibuca and MrSavage yet another substantial refresh going into that half and half rotate, and now having 4 kills going into 5th zone, they were poised to have a very good game already. Going into the late game, first moving again, there was no Queasy and Venno on top playing high ground, but it was Bevies and Vortexes who do land over towards Chonker's side, who landed over near Chonker's side, who decided to play height this time. Malibuca and MrSavage into this first moving zone. They started off with 6 kills going into that moving zone and found a total of 9 more in total towards the end of the game, which they ended up winning, which is a ridiculous amount of kills in this sort of meta. They find a big impact frag early on after one of them gets taken down to 30 HP, and luckily for them, the zone sort of pulls all around the mountain just favorably enough where they can tunnel through low ground, and giving them the opportunity to eliminate more of the players on low ground. In the final 2v2, Bevies makes a mistake though on high ground. After realizing the zone pulls up a mountain, he decides to drop down aggressively to try to get kills. Gets taken out very swiftly by Malibu and MrSavage's together, and that allows Malibu and MrSavage's to find their 15th kill of the game, giving them a total of 62 points in one game, moving up from 18 points to 80 just in one game. And that is just very classic and on par for what Malibu and MrSavage's. Game number 5 started off again with the Malibu and MrSavage's battle, and they took care of them just as quickly as game number 3. Within 10 seconds, Swag and Pablo were taken out for another 4 points and early Storm Surge. This time, we saw Pink and Nas going for an aggressive play after a big beam on the team near gas station, unfortunately dying in a 2v2. So again, seeing them struggle a little bit with their early game aggression and trying to find some sort of game plan from the near draw spot of Joneses. Moving away from the early game, and you'd think this is early game, but it isn't. But it's Marine and Nebs and No One Reason still fighting it out 12 minutes into the game, having Storm fought at the draw spot for 10 minutes. So at this point, they didn't really care about qualifying anymore. All they cared about was basically alphaing the draw spot. It finally ended with Reason dying the Storm and Noah swiftly being finished afterwards, making the overall score 2-2. But they basically both lose as Marine and Nebs died very swiftly afterwards in the Storm, trying to rotate towards zone. Again, into the late game, a new team approaches high ground of Chronic and Canox, who on 24 points, like the other teams in the lobby, are trying to get a big point break to maybe get top 10. And making top 10 would essentially auto-qualify you towards heats, and that's what everyone is looking for in these finals. We're back again with Malibu and MrSavage's and late game as they show again a relatively quiet game for the rest of the lobby. So they basically just used their grapplers, got front side of zone with ease, found some meaningful kills going towards the final moving zones when Malibu went for low ground and then MrSavage's got knocked. Unfortunately, Malibu wasn't able to pick him up, so he had to solo clutch. Luckily for him though, Chicho on the high ground, who's been playing insanely well in this final, held high ground 2v1 and ended up getting both kills, ending in a 1v1 against Malibu. And Malibu also took a lot of damage at the same time, as did Chicho. But luckily for Malibu, he ended up winning the game 2 in a row now in that 2v2 and giving them another 44-point game. So from those 3rd game to the 6th game, they've multiplied their points by 6 in total, which is insanely impressive. To the last game of the tournament, we saw a lot of teams being very close to each other on the leaderboard, and Malibu and MrSavage's made sure to make use of that. They WK'd a potential qualifying team of Waze and Zest instead of Coney Crossroads, and eliminating them very quickly for another 4 points in total. Venom and Crazy at this point were essentially already qualified on 173 points, which made them comfortable. However, Frey noticed the way that they played Storm Surge split on different mountains and abused that and WK'd them, ended up taking both of them out. Over towards the mid game, we saw more issues from Savage and Hen, with Savage getting in trouble, leaving Hen down to solo clutch with no success unfortunately, and that ended the tournament on 100 points in total, only gaining 29 points in the last 3 games of the final after such a great start. So we're seeing still some issues from this new duo, but hopefully we'll see them improve as the weeks progress of FNCS. Going towards the late game, we saw a repetition of game number 1 with Vortex and Haikus going on to height in the moving zones, but Tayson catches out Haikus and gives them the opportunity to go in heights. And being the last game of the tournament, it was relatively dead, which further helped Malibu and MrSavage's frag out on the mid ground and low ground, racking themselves multiple kills in that area. The final 1v1 came down to Malibu and MrSavage's yet again versus Tayson and Chapix. Unfortunately though, the water zone was just a little bit too much for the amount of materials they had to use, and Tayson and Chapix ended up winning the last game of the tournament and securing themselves 1st place in the final, being the most impressive out of all of the duos in terms of consistency. And that was essentially the end of the tournament. In the end, the leaderboard, Tayson and Chapix were in 1st place with a ridiculous average placement of 4.8. Chapix and Chicho were in 2nd, similarly as consistent from the mid ground. Crazy and Venom's height play, we saw a little bit of issues there. We saw them be a little bit less consistent as we see a shift in the playstyle. Seems like mid ground seems to be a lot more preferable to height perhaps, but it was good enough for 3rd place. Malibu and MrSavage's came back immensely as we saw with back-to-back wins and the 2nd place in the last 3 games, and game 2 winners of Cheatin and Gripey ended up squeaking out the qualification in 5th place, beating out 6th by just 3 points in total. And that was basically the FNCS finals in a nutshell. Hopefully you guys caught up to it and saw some things that you maybe missed out on. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Goodbye.